questions?
Susan, I have a question. You mentioned Vasi's shepherd named Dionisio.
Yeah.
And I had suggested in a sort of playful footnote that that may have had something to do with his fondness for wine. Is there some classical shepherd named Dionisio that might offer us a different trail?
No, there is no.
The god.
Well, the god, of course there's the god, but as Susan said, that they're specifically pulling shepherds out of classical poetry, and there may have been some shepherd named who shared the name with the god.
No, there's not. And very rarely, you'll sometimes see that they'll use a Greek philosopher or something, but they'll tend not to use the name of a Greek god. That really is unusual. I'm a little bit concerned about Vasi's
Is drinking.
about the name. It just seems so odd, and the fact that, I don't know, out of the true 1,000 members, there was only really a handful that didn't take a surname, that second name, so he doesn't have one. So that kind of, I'm also, I wanted, during the show, or during the break, I wanted to go up and look and double check. The Arcadian Society was, if they did anything, they watched to see who was publishing their insignia. And again, they allowed people to use their Arcadian names on the frontispiece, but not necessarily their insignia. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but I worry about Vasi's association with this agency. He didn't play by the rules. He didn't take a second name. And he might have been violating some kind of policy by, especially that poem. I'm sorry, that's the other thing. Why didn't he, he published this Arcadian poem? It should have been with the Arcadian literature in praise of Charles, but it was not.
I wonder if it didn't make the cut on that volume, and so he thought he'd put it out in his own book.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. He's a little bit of an unknown. I mean, even after, here at the end of the conference, do we know anything about him? His political leanings, do we know? No, just wondering.
I have a question about the location of the Bosco, being right next to the Corsini Palace and grounds.
Yeah.
But I've been told, or I've come to understand that they didn't sell the land to the Arcadians, but maybe they did. I'd like to know if you have any insight about why that particular property was chosen.
Oh, financial. They got very little money from the King of Portugal to build that garden. And they actually, they do everything as a team effort, and they got a committee together, and they found.
So it was unbuildable land that they.
Yeah, it's marginal land. It's between the city wall and the Porta San Pancrazio, little strips there.
Little strip, tiny little things. I think they felt it was the best financial deal for the money. They really tried to stay away from being given land by a patron. I mean, anything that, at least, clearly they were all engaged in the politics of the day, but they really tried to stay neutral in terms of direct patrons.
Susan, I think Catherine Ray may have an
Oh,
idea or a follow-up.
Okay.
I wouldn't call it marginal land myself. I would point out there's two very distinctive things. First, it's a slice of land. It's not, if you were to describe it physically, it would be essentially a kind of triangle.
Right.
But I would also mention one reason why it's not marginal land is because there was actually a spring.
Yes,
That's
right.
And the spring, if you're going to be in Arcadia, you must have a spring.
Yeah,
and that sits at the top.
Yes.
And everything evolves from that. Not to put too fine a point on water, which I always do.
You're absolutely right.
But to me, that's very important, and it doesn't make it marginal. In fact, it makes it very important land.
The notes, again, the committee's notes, they're talking about sun, they're talking about water access, they talk about reusing the trees because they're trying to make the land self-sustainable. So the extant trees, what can they get from selling the wood by cutting the trees down, or what can they get from that particular whatever that tree bears? So they're thinking practicality and water is right in there.
Aren't they also returning to their roots? It's really in the gardens of the ex-Palazzo Iario with Queen Christina that they began, and that certainly, that's not a financial consideration, but that had to weigh.
Yeah, that's right. Queen Christina living in the Palazzo Corsini, and
but separated by the town wall, huh?
That's right. Very. Corsini, I haven't mentioned that. Corsini, obviously Cardinal Neri and the Pope was very interested in, playing fair with Arcadia, but really it was during the Corsini Pope's reign that, Lorenzini basically trashed the organization. And as you know, in the garden, behind the Corsini garden, that's where, I didn't bring the slide, but Panini has a nice slide, drawing of a beautiful amphitheater made out of verdura. It's really quite beautiful. And that's where the kind of remnants of the schismatic society had their little Accademia dei Querini. That's where they had their little meetings in the shadow of the Bosco Palazzo. It's a pitiful little place. No, I'm sorry, it's a beautiful little place.
I'm a little bit unclear on just who these people were. You describe them as not the nobility, but obviously they're concerned with social class because they have these ruses to disguise themselves, if only in fantasy.
Yeah.
So could you say just a few words about what sort of social class these people comprise?
Oh, class is so hard in papal 18th century Rome. Class is such an odd word. They, there were the whole gamut. Yes, there were.
There a pope?
The popes were invited, and there were cardinals, but also the Monsignor, the lower tier. There were
Cross section.
It is a cross section. Women, although the women tended to be from the upper class, the men could be, a veritable cross section. I think that's correct.
And unusual for them.
Yes, very unusual.
But the fact that they used these pseudonyms was also important because they didn't have to use their titles. And so they felt equal.
Yeah.
And when they were on intellectual grounds and discussing intellectual things, they all felt that they were all the same. They didn't have to use titles or illustrissimo, magnificentissimo, and things like that.
That's right, that's right.
They started feeling that these social rules were too strong when they actually had to talk about important things, science, poetry, arts, and politics, and things like that. And they left all the social rules for ceremonies.
And they did, even in their own garden for the ceremonies. They kept a paper, they'd hire a papal consultant to.
Good, well, plenty to think about. Thank you very much, Susan.